Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Really nice to have you here. I've got really large numbers today, which is absolutely fantastic, probably because of our special guest. So let's get started. Now, this starter slide, you might have seen this technique already, is called blackout poetry. Now, I saw this a while ago. If you can't hear, by the way, do please shout out, oh, voice is not clear. Everybody else okay? I'm hoping. Yeah, fine. Okay, lovely. Welcome, everybody. Hi, everybody. Right, so blackout poetry. I saw this ages ago and I thought I absolutely must give it a go, but it just never seemed the right time in the classroom. And also, I didn't want to tear a whole book up. So this last week, I was in for half term at school and I did a murder mystery activity, which went really rather quickly. The students were a lot better at it than I thought. And I had this wonderful idea. I thought, here's a paperback book that I don't really want to read, that I don't mind ripping up. It was in the staff sharing area. I will rip out some pages, give them a quick scan, and we can do ransom notes. So I was really pleased with one student who came up with this. Okay, so Zoe's with me, not your local cops. So you have a number they don't know. And I thought, really, that's quite clever. Excellent. Then I realised I hadn't scanned the pages as well as I hoped because the final bit, and they have a nose for this, don't they, was this. Remember the guy who lost his virginity while he was dressed up as Shrek? So the activity ended at that point, obviously. So I'm going to do more of this activity next week, but I just wanted to warn you that if you do it, it really is worth reading the book very clearly and carefully to start with. Okay, so, and yes, people are saying they've done that and they love it. I love it, but I'm going to do it more carefully next time. So let's get on to what's happening today. We've got Kat Howard coming in and she'll be with you very shortly. She's listening in now and is with us. So let's look at what we're going to do. We're going to check in as usual. Then I'm just going to give you a little bit of feedback on previous sessions. We're going to look at online resources, what I've found for you, then over to Kat, and then it'll be time to get into breakout rooms as per usual. If you haven't been with us before, that gives you a time to work with a small group and ask questions and share ideas. Somebody's saying, should there be video? Yes, there should. I'm hoping that's just a localized. If you've got a problem with your individual access to this, if you put it in the Q&A, it's much better. Okay. Oh, I haven't shared my webcam. That's the problem. There we go. Sorry, my fault. Too excited about our special guest. That's the problem. Okay, so let's move on. Feedback. Just wanted to share there some positives. As usual, a lovely hour spent. That was great. Great resources and ideas shared, which is brilliant. Some suggestions. I would like a bit more time for Julie to explain things, and that was echoed with somebody else who said a bit rushed, especially in the chat. So I've taken that on board. There aren't many resources this week because Kat's going to be talking to you. But next week I'm going to put less in and spend more time on it. So hopefully that's going to be better. A couple of other things. Somebody asked for more on evaluation, so I'm going to do more of that next week. Somebody asked, and it was Jenny, I think, can we teach Shakespeare remotely? That's something maybe we could share in the group chat, or we could talk about when we do literature in 2 weeks. Kat might have some ideas on that. It's interesting. I think it's difficult, but I think it's doable. And also asked about reading 19th century texts, and I'm going to do something about that next week. Okay. And just a special thanks to Sara from Shara, who I've seen a couple of times. I hope she's with us. She said thank you because it was comforting, and she appreciates the time we spend on it. So that's really nice. A quick shout out here. Somebody asked the same as this, more imaginative starters, so hopefully I can keep that going. More of the same, lovely. And again, the usual Blood Brothers and Journey's End resources. So please, if anybody's got it, when we come to the sharing section later on, if we've got some new people with us today, perhaps they can share something, okay? Oh, somebody says, we've done a remote home learning booklet for Key Stage 2 and Shakespeare. Brilliant. If you could send that in to us, we can put it onto the new website shared area, which you'll see at the end, on the slides at the end. So that'd be fantastic. Okay, let's just go into three questions, just 2 minutes on these questions, if we could. What has been your biggest problem with remote learning? mine, obviously, as you can tell, has been using the technology. What, if anything, has been a highlight of your remote school and college experience? And how many cakes and biscuits do you think you consumed? Okay, so quick question on that. Unlimited, absolutely, yes. Engagement of students, everybody's saying that's been their biggest problem, yeah. Engagement, me totally, yeah. Student motivation, student engagement, absolutely. Lack of personal contact, yes, it does seem strange, doesn't it? More CPD time has been somebody's highlight. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Being able to manage my own time, yeah. Worry about the kids, absolutely. And everybody's been eating far too many biscuits. Oh, it's lovely that everybody's saying they've had much more time for CPD. It does make you realise, actually, how little time we get. I think that's, I've read a lot of books, actually. A lot of books for CPD, which has been great. Oh, students who don't normally have a voice in lessons are contributing more. I think that's brilliant, actually. I've had some lovely short stories from a class that are usually very quiet, which has been great. And Simone's buying multi-packs of biscuits, which are probably lasting a week. I don't know that mine are. Keeping track of mixed work, somebody's saying, is an issue. Yeah, I totally get that. Okay. Well, let's move on from that because we're getting very similar. Oh, lovely. Somebody said Pearson sessions have been their saviour. That's fantastic. Thank you. That's really nice. So if we could go away from that, please, on to the next slide. Brilliant. Seamlessly working today, isn't it? Online resources, just going to whistle through a few things I've found this week. This has been one of my saviours. I'm sure other people have found this already, but my students are listening to the recording of Jekyll and Hyde, which is fantastic. And one student actually said that it really helped her to hear it read rather than to read it herself. That was a really good idea. And there's lots of other books on there as well. So that was another one, just in case you'd forgotten that was there. Website of the week, Masalit. I haven't used this before. It was new to me. It's got loads of really good lectures on. All you need to do is register, and then it does say, I actually ask you for a school name and everything, but I registered as me actually, and it didn't seem to mind. And then you get an email back in a couple of weeks, and you can actually log on and use the resources, and they're fab. So, and somebody there saying, Emma's saying it's excellent, okay? And somebody says there's voiceover. Oh, Masalit is a God saver. Brilliant, excellent. So yeah, that's something I think is really brilliant. I'm really excited about using that. It's great, but only free for a short period. Yes, I do realise that. I think Kat was saying Kat Howard was saying she's got a subscription to it with her school. So maybe you could persuade your school. I'm not sure how much it is. If somebody knows how much it is, they could perhaps put it up on the chat box so that everybody knows. And then the British Library, I've been on there a lot today because I was looking for something quite meaty for my top set year 10. One particular boy wants to go into more depth. So I was finding a couple of 19th century documents about Jekyll and Hyde, and I found on the British Library site an original newspaper review of Jekyll and Hyde, which I would suggest you have if you're teaching Jekyll and Hyde and you've got bright students, you have a look at, because it was really, really useful and thought-provoking for him. Another little goodie that I used to use all the time is British Council. Obviously, TEFL teachers use it, and they are intended for foreign students. But there was a lovely couple of lessons there for Pride and Prejudice and Tale of Two Cities and a couple of others. So again, that's worth looking at. Hugh says that the Masalit is about £3,000 per unit per year. Oh, somebody else says £400. So there's a bit of difference there. I'm not sure. I'll try and check that out for you for next time. Okay, so we're good to go. We're about on time, which is great. So, Kat. So if somebody could now put Kat up on the screen, so she's got her video. So you need to turn your video and microphone on, please, Kat. Now, Kat Howard, if you don't know her, is the founder of a fabulous resource for teachers called Lit Drive, which is well worth looking at. And is she ready to join us?
I think, Julie, you can hear me.
Sorry?
I said I'm here if you can hear me. Here we go. There you go.
Yes, I can hear you. I can't see you though. Video. You can open your video up. Brilliant. Hi, Sam. Okay, so I'm going to move on to that slide just to show you what Lit Drive looks like. Now, that was when I looked last week, 3,452 resources of all varieties, okay? So I'm going to let Kat talk about that. First, I'm going to ask her a few questions about her book, which is here. It's, I hope you can see the title there. It's called Stop Talking About Wellbeing, a Pragmatic Approach to Teacher Workload. And I read that a couple of weeks ago with a mixture of huge relief and some sadness, actually, that not all schools I'd worked at were like that, and excitement that there were things that I could
exactly what you said,
share with teachers
Julie,
that I
just
think would
around
make a
that kind
massive
of that
difference to their workload when we think about why teachers
knowing
left the profession.
how inconsistent
So I
I
just
think
wanted
the
to ask
profession
Kat,
is as a whole.
to start
So
with,
we
what led
have
you to write
some
it?
incredible things going on within schools, and some incredible practice and freedom and that kind of connection that teachers feel to the work that they're doing, and that feeling of teacher purpose and being able to do that. And then in other schools, it looks entirely different, and it was just that frustration at what felt, I often describe the profession as an inconsistent franchise. You know, it's almost this collection of subways where, you know, some of them have got a fantastic menu, and then others are entirely different. So it was just really that frustration that I could see, having visited several schools, and I spent a lot of my maternity leave visiting other people and seeing how different schools did things. It was just quite, that frustrating. You know, how is it that some places are putting so much trust and time and investment into their staff and other places weren't, and how we can kind of change that narrative, really.
No, I agree. I probably have been to about 250 schools now in my role for Pearson's, and the vast majority have been absolutely fantastic. But like you say, I have worked in some where staff wellbeing, and I don't think in many schools it's absolutely at the top, which is strange. Like you, I came from business. I've only been teaching about 15 years.
And I think that, go on, sorry.
And that's how much it's aged me.
I think
no,
as well, it's just the barriers that were
coming from industry where
I think sometimes
staff are your greatest tool. I think it's interesting.
Slightly more effectively, we're very behind when it comes to flexible working. We're very behind when it comes to things like time costing, how we do things. So, for example, things like, I think I point out in the book about mock exams, and I know we were talking before about marking and the time that it takes to mark. If that was in a business sector, they'd be time costing that up and working out how much it's going to cost them for those staff to carry out that work. And we don't necessarily work like that. And so I think, that insight has been really useful for me to put myself as a senior lead, to put myself sometimes in, you know, classroom teacher shoes and NQT shoes, and think, okay, well, what does this look like for them? How many hours of work are we asking that person to carry out, and is that time available? I think that's really important.
Yes, I agree.
I think for Wellbeing,
what one bit of advice would you give to teachers then? Because it's very hard if you're inside an institution, obviously changing it is difficult. You have to go with the flow of the institution you're with. But what is something teachers could do for themselves, do you think?
It's the core of everything that we do. It's the core of our teacher purpose. It's what we come in to do every day. You know, we want to think about teaching, talk to other teachers about teaching, or teach. And I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it, at the moment in the situation that we are, and that's the discontent that I think a lot of people went through in the earlier stage of lockdown, is that we're not able to do that one thing that we really enjoy about teaching. It's not answering emails, it's not inputting data, and so it's planning and having those conversations with teachers, which is why things like this are so important. But I think that is the one simple way that any teacher in any context can look after their well-being is making sure that they're keeping that professional self really fulfilled. Immerse yourself in the curriculum, find opportunities to talk to other teachers about curriculum, and keep yourself kind of rooted to that core purpose, that reason that you enjoy teaching so much in the first place. I think instead of maybe viewing it as something that's another piece of work, I think you cannot underestimate, I think, the power of a decent curriculum and the impact that has on people's well-being, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're absolutely right there. As we said earlier, before we came on air, as it were, my two interesting things takes from it that I would like to change were something I don't do is using PowerPoints. Obviously, I
With
do
marking,
it here, but in the
I think they give
classroom.
a couple of
But the other
like
thing was the
practical
reducing
examples
marking
in the
load,
book
and I
around
think that's really
whole
difficult
class
as an
feedback.
individual
And I know
teacher. How would
so
you
many schools,
suggest individual
particularly
teachers
following
get that
from
message
particular
across in
schools,
schools where the marking
having
workload is
Ofsted in, and
heavy?
Ofsted really kind of, really commending the use of whole class feedback has been really powerful. It's not only more effective, it's that double win that I think sometimes we look at things that reduce workload as corner cutting, and actually whole class feedback is not only quicker for the teacher, but it's actually more effective and fulfilling in the way that we give feedback. And I think that's absolutely key. And if that isn't something that's in place in your school at the moment, just asking if you can trial something as a research project. If you've got one year 7 group, just ask if you can trial whole class feedback with that year 7 group, because the impact of whole class feedback speaks for itself. And I think it's just, being brave enough to have those conversations. You can still carry out whole class feedback via when we're working remotely. So we can, if you're setting work for students, you can still give feedback in that way. But I think just being brave enough to frame it as a research project, as a trial run, and actually as people see the impact of whole class feedback, I think it really gets it really gets the teachers excited and engaged with it. I think the other thing that we can do, particularly at the moment, and it's going to be really useful, I don't think it's kind of corona specific, I think corona specific is just good teaching, is multiple choice questions have been absolutely fundamental for us and will continue to be, for working out where kids are at without putting loads of pressure on them. I've seen a couple of things this morning around the idea of setting marks when we go back into school, and or looking ahead and getting a baseline idea in September. And I don't necessarily think that, it's massively workload heavy, but irrespective of that, even if we have the time to do that, it's actually not really going to be that useful as data for us to get an indication as to what those students do or don't know. Whereas multiple choice questions will do that in a very low stakes, pressureless way, and actually be more useful for us, I think.
They will.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes a danger.
I agree. It's the old weighing a pig thing, isn't it? It just doesn't get fatter just because you keep weighing it every week. And we, doing teaching, seem to be led down we're weighing all the time, aren't we? Weighing and entering the data somewhere.
And what we need to teach in response to that. It's really not that useful.
That's interesting. Before I hand over to you alone, Hayley's just put, because this cropped up for me this week, how can we use multiple choice when exam questions are mainly long answer? What I did this week for Jekyll and Hyde, because interestingly, I got 85% take up on the multiple choice versus 60% on the essay, which is interesting. But I actually, you can intersperse, I don't know what you think, but you can intersperse simple questions like what is Utterson's profession with read line so-and-so, which of the three following do you feel is the best analysis of that particular line? And I got really good, and I actually had one student come back and say, actually, Miss, I disagree with your right answer. So actually, I think you can do multiple choice
the right adjectives to describe
meaningful language analysis way as well.
Multiple choice questions are very, very good at being able to provide that for students. They're really useful, and we use them as an integral part of our assessment, and we're looking to do that to run that through Key Stage 3 as we move into September as well, because I think it's going to be particularly useful as we work remotely, particularly to make sure that we maintain a standard as such for students. About 15 minutes, you said, didn't we?
I'm going to pass over to you now. So I'm going to, I think hopefully I'll disappear. I think I have to switch my video off for that. So when you finish, I'll be...
Hello everybody, now I'm flying solo. This is interesting. I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of that, building on what I said earlier about curriculum and the connection that we have to the curriculum, and collaboration. So kind of those 3 C's overall. I'm not going to put presentation up. I did say to Julie I prefer people see my face and we talk and I gesticulate a lot, and that's probably more interesting to watch than a PowerPoint, especially working remotely. Hi Hugh, lovely to see you. Hi Lisa, hi Simone. Hello. So I'm going to talk about those 3 things: the curriculum, our connection to the curriculum and why that's important, and also our collaboration around the curriculum, again, why that's important, and how we try to do that as we kind of work in this heady mix of having staff in school and then having staff out of school. And I'll just talk you through our approach at the Justin School where I am, and how we've gone about that, just to maybe so that you've got a few ideas to take away. I think it's important now about this connection that we have to the curriculum. As I said before, I think that a lot of us, and myself included, went through that kind of lack of connection, that real disconnect with work. I'm very, very passionate about being a teacher, and so those first few weeks in lockdown of not being able to teach, not engaging with people about teaching and having those face-to-face conversations, those really, meaty conversations about our subject discipline, I really missed that, and I think that's essentially our core purpose as teachers, and the bit that we enjoy the most. We don't enjoy sending emails, we don't enjoy, what I do, inputting data. I enjoy, teaching children or talking to other teachers about teaching children. So that loss of that has been quite a struggle. And I think ultimately, if we're going to talk about well-being and feeling more fulfilled as teachers, a lot of that comes back to our connection with the curriculum, because as academic intellectuals of our subjects, that's what we came in to do, really. It's connected to everything. So curriculum is almost the core of everything that we do. And I've blogged in kind of a few different on my blog in a few different segments, almost like a 2-part section around this idea of kind of curriculum, because I think sometimes we suffer a disconnect with curriculum, that it's historically something that we've seen as somebody else's job. So either a senior leader or a subject leader, that's for them to worry about, and that's what they do, and I just kind of come in and I teach what I'm told to teach, and so we kind of sometimes lose autonomy, and we lose that sense of ownership over curriculum. I also think that sometimes we assume that experience of curriculum sometimes comes with having to be a teacher for a certain amount of time, and maybe not necessarily utilising those teachers that all of us have come with 4 years of higher education, and how do we utilise those people within our schools that all come with very diverse subject knowledge. So as an example of English particularly is, you have people that are working within your faculty perhaps that have classics degrees, or, history element, or linguistics, or literature. And so where are we actually utilising that as a whole collaborative approach? And does our curriculum reflect that? So I think that's really important as well. I think if we're thinking about, well, how do I feature? So if you kind of sat there thinking, well, I'm an NQT or I'm going to be an NQT and I don't really feel like curriculum has anything to do with me, I'd very much argue that you're mistaken, and that we are all designers of the curriculum. We all, either at senior leader level, you're setting the conditions for the curriculum to take place. You're setting up those processes so that any barriers to that work are thinking about teaching, talking about teaching, or teaching itself, anything that's getting in the way of that, senior leaders are responsible for ensuring that that doesn't impact on work on the curriculum, doesn't impact on that time. If you are a subject lead, you've got that, that empowered role that's, I would say, one of the best in the school, to think strategically about your subject, the connections from one unit to the next, how your subject, or how English as a subject connects and works with, in that kind of symbiotic process between English and history, or English and RS, and how we kind of feed each other, almost as such. And then if you're a classroom teacher, you are in one of the best possible positions because you're delivering that curriculum. You're taking what is such a vast and exciting and interesting subject as literature and language, and you're making it translatable for students. So curriculum is everybody's responsibility, very much so, I would argue. And so with that idea of mind, of collaboration in mind, particularly at the moment, I think it's been really, really tricky for schools to maintain that, to make everybody feel as though curriculum is their job, is something to do with them. I think that's been really difficult. At the best of times, I think that's tricky because of the reasons that I gave before, but also particularly difficult when we're working remotely. A great deal of that comes down to our inability to have conversations. We need to, those kind of 5-minute conversations that we have in the corridor about text, or how we've approached something in a different way, or how a class went, or that one person that came up with this amazing answer that you just want to go and share with somebody else. We don't have that anymore, and so we're almost carrying out the theory without the practice. That's a real struggle. I would say that's also kind of where we're at with CPD as well. There's so much fantastic CPD on offer at the moment, but it is, isn't it? It's that itch you want to scratch where you're not able to put it into practice, and I very much feel that itch. But that does present challenges when it comes to work around the curriculum, because we're not at the moment. Or to a degree, obviously we have remote learning, but it's not the same. It's not the same sense of fulfilment. So that's presented a real challenge to working collaboratively. I just kind of talk you through how we've got around that and the different ways that we've got around it. Then that might be kind of useful for subject leaders, or if you're a teacher, to kind of take back in and suggest to your subject leaders as a way of working for the period of time that we've got now running up to summer. But also, I think we've learned a lot about how we can work remotely and how we can overcome those challenges and work on the curriculum during this time. So the way in which we approached it, when we knew that we were going into lockdown, and we'd done a lot of work around the curriculum and mapped out changes and what we were going to do and how that was going to look next year. Once we'd done that, we shared a great deal about how we were going to work, and we very much wanted to place this kind of emphasis on not making people feel this level of expectation, I think. So not directing what people were going to work on. I think that was important. I think that's important anyway. If you're going to feel autonomy or ownership over what you're doing when it comes to curriculum work, you don't want to be told. So, for example, if you're a linguistics specialist, if your degree was language, I don't want you to be working on Shakespeare. Or I don't want you to necessarily be working on the literature text. I want you to work about something that you're really excited about. Now, it might be that your degree was in linguistics and you're really excited about working on Macbeth, or you're really excited about working on literature text. That's fine. But whatever it is, I wanted staff to elect to work on units and review units that would excite them while we were working in isolation, while we were working at home. It's really, really important. And so as a subject, if you're in a subject lead role, it's really important that you kind of approach that with inviting people to take on the work rather than directing. It's incredibly important because it's going to enable them to feel that sense of autonomy and maintain that level of excitement that we want to around curriculum. So what we did is we mapped out the kind of nuts and bolts of what this looked like. We mapped out everything on a spreadsheet as to what needed to be reviewed, what we wanted to design. So the multiple choice questions that I was referring to earlier, we said, right, for every single unit, we want to put a workbook together that will enable us to long term continue to work towards our kind of school improvement plan. But also, if we're thinking about what remote working might look like as we go into September, and we may need to take a blended approach that actually sets us up in a really good, really robust situation for curriculum delivery. So we want to create a workbook for all units. We want to create a multiple choice question quiz for each unit, because what that means as well, if we're thinking again long-term gains, talk a lot about time costing, that multiple choice quiz can then be used with year 7 for the unit of work in September. We could then give that to year 7 again in January to see how much of that knowledge was retained, and again in June. And so it's creating those kind of quick wins, really detailed resources that are going to have longevity to them. And then we wanted to deliver big lectures to introduce each of the units to students. So we carry out big lectures at Key Stage 4 at the moment. We wanted to filter that down to Key Stage 3 so that for every unit we kind of give this really exciting, really inspiring lecture at the beginning to introduce the subject to them. Again, that's going to create longevity because we can use that forever. We didn't want to be in a position where we were getting stuff to work at home on quick win stuff or stuff that we weren't going to use again, stuff that doesn't have longevity. So we set about the spreadsheet. We elected people to decide what they wanted to work on, really important. And then we also created a really informal review process. So each of the units that people were working on, they needed to set up with 2 reviewers that they were going to have conversations with. It just enabled to get people to work in cluster groups rather than individually. So we maintain that sense of collaboration and everybody is feeding upon everybody else's subject knowledge rather than this kind of being in isolation. We encourage people to pick up the phone or we use Microsoft Teams, so people having that face-to-face contact rather than sitting at home in isolation, working on a workbook and not necessarily talking to anybody. And so it had to go through kind of 2 people and have those conversations along the process before it even gets to Key Stage leave for any QA to take place. The other thing we did is carry out a series of, and we're maintaining this now, it's been really lovely, is weekly CPD sessions within the faculty. That kind of did 2 things. It enables everybody to feel connected, that sense of connection to the curriculum. We're still having those conversations, and it actually opened up really good opportunities to have chats about what CPD people had carried out that week, what they've been reading, what they've been watching. So that was a really nice opportunity to do that. We kind of had this informal level to it. But we also, it was kind of 20 to 30 minute short burst CPD that really supported with how to plan out your curriculum, how to map that out. What are the big ideas that we need to think about within curriculum? How will your unit connect to? So, for example, on the overviews for each of the units of work within the curriculum, we outline where the students have come from. So have a think about what they've picked up along the way. So, for example, if we were planning a Merchant of Venice in year 9, then I'd explicitly refer on my overview and say, okay, well, they've picked up the element of segregation through studying of mice and men previously. They will have picked up the element of kind of gender representation because we do an origins of literature. So really thinking about those kind of explicit connections and making sure that that's part of the curriculum planning. Another example of those weekly sessions was we talked through sequencing. We talked about credibility of knowledge. So, within the knowledge organiser, that which was our baseline for knowledge, rather than kind of, the holy grail. It can never be everything. A knowledge organiser, it's a starting point. What needed to be included on there? What was our essential knowledge that was going to exist within that unit? So we talked about kind of sequencing, and we did some training around multiple choice questions and assessment and what that might look like. And so it was just this weekly check-in that ensured that that people were still able to have those conversations and stay really connected to their curriculum overall. That was incredibly important for us. It's been a lovely process kind of taken along the way, because from the conversations that have taken place, I actually had a really nice conversation with one of our English teachers who was reviewing workbook for me for Key Stage 3 that I'd put together, and she actually emailed back saying, giving me feedback and everything and letting me know what she thought. And then she said, oh, it feels very much like this overwhelming sense of relief and satisfaction when you finish one of these units. It takes me back to university, and that sense of satisfaction of completing something in that sense. And we had a really nice conversation around that, and it really just cemented to me, how important spending this time on the right things is about this kind of as I say, this maintaining this role that we have as teachers to stay connected with the curriculum. I think that's incredibly important. So yeah, that's kind of all I really wanted to talk about, is about kind of ensuring that during this period of time that there's so much CPD out there. It's absolutely fantastic, but maybe just keep in mind about what keeps you fulfilled with your subject, I think, is really important. And how can you ensure that you're having conversations with everybody that you work with to maintain almost to replicate the corridor as such, while we don't have a corridor. Just on the back of that, if you look out in the next few days, I'll be making an announcement. Myself and Claire Hill will be making an announcement shortly regarding a book that's coming out later this year around curriculum. So if you just keep your eyes out for that in the next few days, it's very exciting. I'm very excited about it, and it just kind of really crystallises all the things that I've talked about today. So hopefully you'll find that useful. But thanks very much for listening and watching.
Thanks, Kat. A couple of questions came up there. That was really brilliant. It was really interesting. I particularly like the idea of the multi-choice as checks. I like that, the idea of checks that aren't massive during the year, during a topic. I think that's great. What came across from what people were sharing was two things. One, excitement of collaborative curriculums, but also workload. So it's that kind of balance between the two. But also one thing that, and this resonated with me a little bit, was staff resistance to changing curriculums, because presumably of the workload issue, they're attached to their particular, niche, or want to carry on in that way. So that was interesting. Yeah. A couple of questions then. Sarah Shepard asked, and this is quite specific, but would help everybody, I'm sure. Year 7 narrative writing. What would be your must-have lesson or activity to engage and excite? There you go. I think
with writing, I'm not sure if it would be exciting, I'm afraid, because I'm a stickler for routines. But I think with writing is that actually, particularly Key Stage 3, are excited when they're confident, and that comes with routines. And so it's providing them with examples of fantastic writing, as much exposure as any year group can have to amazing pieces of writing, and you really bringing that to life as well. I think there's a lot to be said, and there's so much research around the power of reading aloud and providing examples of reading aloud, and building confidence around reading aloud and how that can feed into writing. So I would say start with exposure to loads and loads of text. And ensure that that they're exciting in themselves. Your excitement comes through your enthusiasm for the subject. I think the excitement is always, for me, it's in the knowledge rather than the activity. So I'll probably not provide you with an activity as such, but I'd just say make sure that what they're reading is such a stellar standard.
And there was another, Mega wants to know about differentiation, how you would best cater. I think particularly at this time with, we don't know at the moment how long we're going to go on with the online learning, but how do you, I find it difficult, the differentiation, how do you cater for slow learners within one class at the moment?
Well, at the moment, we as such as slow learners, I'm very much a teacher to the top. I am very much of the impression that the teacher is the expert, and the teacher needs to kind of make those micro decisions, which is why it's so difficult at the moment. Make those micro decisions in classes to, teach to the top, and then see who needs more of your support to get there. I am that's my standpoint and where I am on kind of differentiation, and it's differentiation almost by outcome, so by the task itself. I think, irrespective of coronavirus and where we're at the moment, I don't necessarily feel that our expectations of students need to drop when it comes to the work itself. But I don't mean individual circumstances and a pastoral side, but as far as the work itself, I don't feel that our expectations need to drop. I think it is just a case of asking the right questions and making sure that, so planning key questions for learning is really kind of key around that. And yeah, just checking for understanding. It's coming back to that.
Yeah.
Don't question to find the right answer. Question, because you want to know who's getting it wrong. You want to know who doesn't know rather than who does know.
Does know, yeah. I forget where I read it recently. I read somebody had said that if somebody says they don't know the answer, you say yes, but what would your answer be if you did know it? I love that.
Yeah,
I thought that was.
Tom Sherrington talks a lot about. Tell me about what do you think, and tell me your opinion on this, and invite them to the conversation rather than making them feel like there's a right or a wrong answer. I think that's absolutely key.
A lot of people are asking in the little time we've got to more about your big lectures, because I've put in capitals "love it" next to that. So tell us more about your big lectures.
Yeah, so we've made the decision. We use big lectures mainly for revision. It's kind of either about a key concept of the text or just an overview, plot, character, theme, leading up to revision. So we tend to run one on each literature text. But we've actually made the decision to filter down to Key Stage 3 now, which I'm really excited about. I've actually blogged about kind of lecture clubs and how that can look, and Cornell note taking, so I'll kind of share that somewhere. It's just a really fantastic way to teach good learning habits, and to maintain that kind of teaching to the top. I think year 7 will love it. I'm just so excited.
Can you give me an example of like, for instance, a year 7 topic that how you would approach it lecture wise?
So what I've just planned for year 7, the origins of literature, that kind of takes them through the origins of kind of Greek mythology, gives them a few examples, makes them realise about how actually the real life context, so it uses like, the Ajax symbol and Pandora, and gives them all everyday examples and says, well, actually, do you realise, Greek mythology is prevalent within your everyday life and you just don't realise it. And then we talk through kind of etymology and the origin of words, and that's when it gets really magical for year 7, when they start realising how many words are connected. But yeah, we'll normally kind of open with a big question. So it's, why is Greek mythology important? And then pull out a couple of examples and talk them through, where Greek mythology came from, the fact that we can't trust stories because they change over time, and then return to that big question at the end. We give them a bit of a framework, so they have like a worksheet to kind of follow the slides and ask a couple of questions, particularly for those students that like to take notes. But it also, it helps them develop those skills around note taking as well.
Are you able to do it in big groups? Would you do it to a whole year group, or would you do it in individual classes? Because I love that idea of it being a really important event.
Yeah, a whole year group. It really formalises learning, and it creates a sense of ceremony, which I think learning should be about. So yeah, whole year group. Yeah,
that's brilliant. I love that idea actually. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna want to go back into the classroom and suggest that. I think now we're going to go into our breakout groups. Now Kat is going to go into one, and if you've got any more questions for Kat that crop up in the meantime, please put them in the group chat, and she's not going away, I hope. So you'll stay in the group. So if I move on to the next slide, which hopefully I can do, and there, you should now all be, if you haven't been with us before, you'll be popped into a group and you'll have a Pearson person, or if you're lucky, you'll get Kat, and you can just chat and ask questions. So let's go, please, to breakout rooms.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, it's Pam. Hi, Pam.
It is Pam. Hi, Julie. It's Julie.
Hi. Okay, everybody, that was really interesting. If we can just go through a few things that were said in my room, mainly the huge excitement, Kat, for the big lectures idea.
Yes, that was
That's
mine too.
the thing. And I was thinking it would be fantastic to do it collaboratively with another department. That would be wonderful. So that was really the main excitement of my room was big lectures. What about you, Pam?
Well, yeah, that was one of the main things about big lectures. Actually, where I used to work, we used to do that, and we used to do it for sixth form, but we didn't do it for, year 10 or 11, which actually it's definitely, I think that's a really good idea. People were talking about making Loom videos and
Yeah.
sending those out, and parents and students have really appreciated those. They talked about Show My Homework. Apparently, you can do good quizzes on there. You quite easily
Yeah.
make quizzes on there. Doddle and Paddle were the other two mentioned, just talking about different platforms people were talking about. So that's it
Okay.
really. But yeah, very interesting. And can I just
Great.
say, sorry, Julie, quickly,
Please do.
sorry. We are going to the chat boxes. We're going to email those out to everybody so they can see the things that were people, all the good ideas people have mentioned. We'll do that after. Sorry, carry on.
Kat, what about you?
Yeah, we were talking about the kind of the challenges around collaborative planning, and if you're in a department where it's normally just kind of seen as one person's job, so the key stage three lead does the key stage three planning and and whatnot, and how to get around that really, and how to work with that. And I just we just kind of suggested about offering to plan or collaboratively plan. Find another person in the department that would like to get involved in planning as well. Say you see it as an opportunity for CPD. I think sometimes it's definitely worth ignoring if nobody shares. By sharing a lot, and the more people that share, the more sharing takes place within a department, you tend to find. But yeah, we're just talking about trying to overcome those challenges, I think.
Excellent. Claire, what about you?
We didn't get very far, but one of the participants was raising the question of how to provide for less able students or SEN students during this period of remote teaching. So we didn't get very far, but we were just starting to think about strategies there. And also I did just mention, I don't know if it's come up so far in the meeting, I didn't hear it, but not everybody knew about the live GCSE lessons that we're offering, and not everybody knew that they
Yeah,
were agnostic, so that's
we
probably
share,
something to flag.
Yeah,
we
we were
share
going to
that.
do that. Yeah.
We share those. Yeah. Okay. Well, given the time left, Pam, we need to do our bit. I just want to say thanks ever so much to Kat for joining
Oh
us.
no, thank you. I've had a lovely time.
Absolute,
Thanks ever so much for having me.
That's good.
absolute
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, if we carry these on, you'll be able to come and join us again, maybe in the autumn term, which would be brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you, and thank you to everybody that's commented with questions. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kat.
so if we move on just to finish, shared resources. Pam, over to you for this bit.
Okay, just briefly, because we're going to run out of time, which is a good thing, obviously, because we've had a great time with Kat. But just to say, I've had some great resources this week from Mega. We had Macbeth, and then Nicole sent in creative writing resources with the concept of drop, zoom, shift method. If you don't know that, then the resources, and Sara gave us creative writing, sent those in, which is great. So as you can see, there's a link at the bottom of the slide, and that link takes you to our new All Singing, All Dancing, following on from these webinars page that we've set up, which has the webinars and the resources that everyone sends in. So have a look at those and you get more ideas. I haven't shared any actual slides or anything from them today because there's no time. But don't forget, moving on, if you've got any other ideas to share, we do our £25 voucher shared resource. That draws next week because it's fortnightly. So any ideas, send them to me at thefullenglish@pearson.com and I will go through them, and then we'll do a draw for those, and sorry, for the £25 voucher. And also, very quickly, I have my legendary now Christmas mini. I've tried to find something else today to put them in, but I just couldn't find anything as suitable. So I've still got my Minnie Mouse Christmas cup here, and if I just pick a winner, drum roll, how exciting is this? Say
For people
nothing.
who haven't joined us before, this is for the feedback survey. So if you do the feedback at the end, you go into the draw next week for a £10 voucher.
Thank you, Julie. And the winner this week is Helen, and we're not supposed to say surnames because of data protection, so I'll just say Helen Q. So if Helen Q is here, do you want to just say you're here in the group chat? If not, don't worry, I will send out the £10 voucher to you anyway. But Helen Q is the winner this week for doing the survey last week. Oh, that's a shame. Helen doesn't seem to be here.
Oh, that's a
well.
shame.
That's the first time that's happened. Usually everyone's already here. Never mind. So I will send that out to you. And
Lovely.
keep sending
Okay,
your resources in. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Okay, so just ending then with next week, it's going to be language. In 2 weeks' time, it'll be literature again. So don't forget to book your place. I really do hope that those people who are with us today to hear Kat will join next week. Usually the slot that Kat took up is taken up with sharing of resources. So it'd be really lovely to see you all again. And all the resources I share are not exam board specific. So you don't have to be with Pearson's, with EdExcel to join us. So you're more than welcome. And it's all sent out afterwards and all shared. What more can we do to help? Just whistle through these things that are coming up. We've got resources. I'm just now doing some PowerPoint lessons, which will have the voiceover recording. I'm doing knowledge, those are knowledge organisers for Boys Don't Cry, Coram Boy and Refugee Boy, they're being done now, so they'll be out soon. We're getting a lot of interest in Boys Don't Cry and Coram Boy, so it'd be lovely if you had a look at those. Then what Claire was saying earlier, free online lessons for Year 10 students. I listened to that today. They went live on the 3rd, and they're there on the YouTube as well as on the Pearson's website. So the first lesson's gone out and it's brilliant. So if you want to direct your students to that, there's it takes them through the whole lesson. It's fab, and there'll be one a week for 6 weeks. Secondary resources, there's the link if you haven't used us before, because I know there are new people here this week. There's the link to all our resources. There's an awful lot there. Claire, who you saw earlier, our subject advisor, she's your first port of call if you've got any queries about the specification or about Pearson's in general. If you were interested in switching or just wanted, I was going to say a visit, but obviously I don't know that I will be doing visits for the foreseeable. If you wanted a one-to-one session, that would be the place to go. And here's the feedback. So I've ended, I think, a couple of minutes early. If anybody's got any questions, please put them in the box. Let me just check. And Mel says, is anything going to become available for Silas Marner? It is a beautiful novel. I don't know. I'm going to leave that over to the Pearson's people to answer that. I don't know on that one. I'm sorry about that. Megan's put there's no draw for shared resources today. No, it's fortnightly. I think everything else. I think we've covered pretty much everything else. As I've said already, join us next week. I'm going to do a bit on evaluation, and I'm going to do a bit on blackout poetry and how to use it. So there we go. That's all from me. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Please do the feedback so that you can go into the £10 draw for next week. And thanks ever so much for everybody. And again, thanks to Kat.